Okay, you can go. It's 9:58, we can go.
Good morning, everyone. Hi. Good morning. Thank you for attending, Lutheran Services Carolina's Black History Month program for 2025. I'm Susanna McNeil, and I'm with the Development and Communications team. My supervisor, Erin Kidd, is running video this morning. And we're so glad to have you. And we also want to thank Trinity Oaks for allowing us to have this event here. We have teammates from all over North and South Carolina who are tuning in today on Teams, and we're going to have a recording of this program available later. We're also going to have Q&A at the end, so we ask that you hold your questions until the end. And now I'd like to introduce our speaker, the Reverend Dr. Derrick Anderson. Dr. Anderson has been the spiritual leader of Soldiers Memorial AME Zion Church in Salisbury since 2016. He has a unique and personal perspective on Black history in Rowan County. He and his brother were two of the first students to integrate Salisbury's white public schools in the 60s. And when integration began, he was the only Black student at Knox Junior High School in Salisbury. In 1968, he was Rowan County's top offensive football player. And he went on to earn degrees from Hampton University, University of Louisville, Asbury Theological Seminary, and Hood Theological Seminary. He's now an adjunct professor at Hood. Dr. Anderson, we're so delighted that you share your stories today. Welcome.
Thank you so much. I count it a privilege to be able to be here and to share with you today. I'm just going to share a bit of my story as it relates to Black history and etc. I was told that I was recommended by David Post, and I don't know what he said about me, but evidently it was good enough to have you to invite me to be here. So we're good to be. It's good to be here. I'm going to share a little bit with you about my story as it relates to Salisbury, because I've lived in Salisbury on at least 4 different occasions. Never would have expected to have been here that many times. I keep running away and they find me and bring me back. So we just want to do that. We'll share. And then, as was mentioned, we will open up for questions. So let me just get started in terms of how Derrick Anderson got to Salisbury and why that may have some meaning as it relates to Black history. Okay, I am a 3rd generation AME Zion pastor, African Methodist Episcopal Zion pastor, 3rd generation. Each my father and my grandfather attended Hood Seminary. They received their calling into the ministry. Started off with my grandfather. He came down from Boston, Massachusetts, and was given a little money to come to Livingstone College to study at Hood Theological Seminary on campus. You mentioned I was a football player. He was on the first football team of Livingstone College. There he met his wife-to-be, and when he graduated, he continued into ministry. He was the first, he pastored in the AME Zion Church. And when he was the pastor of Broadway Temple AME Zion Church in Louisville, Kentucky, he was the first African American that was elected to the state legislature. And I remember getting this piece of paper. I was 5 years old, I guess, saying that I was an honorary page of the Kentucky Assembly. And everybody was smiling about it, so I thought it had to be something good. I didn't know what I was and what I was supposed to do, but he was the first there. And as things happen, I found myself being the first. Okay, he pastored there, and eventually became a bishop in our church. And then a few years later, my father got the calling into the preaching ministry also. And we left Wilmington, North Carolina, where I was born, and we traveled to Salisbury in, I guess, 1956, where he entered Hood Theological Seminary, and I was 5 years old. What happened then is that Livingstone, the ministers, the persons who came to go to Hood's seminary, they got some old army barracks. So all of the students who had families, they got these, I don't know where they got them from, but they had these army barracks, and we stayed in the army barracks, okay? And it was, like a two bedroom, kind of little shotgun. Anybody been in the service? So that was my first time being in Salisbury. And he finished seminary. And I went to Monroe Street School right across from Livingstone College at that time. There's a lot of woods back there then. That's all built up now. And I went to Monroe Street School. And I didn't remember a whole lot about Monroe Street School other than my first grade teacher, all right? And I'm not going to mention her name because I didn't get along with her too much. She had issues with me, all right? I mean, I'm just sitting there just enjoying life, but she had issues. She sent me to the principal's office for this. She got on me about that. So I don't remember any other teacher until maybe the 5th grade, but I remember her, and I'm not calling her name because there might be a relative somewhere. That's right. And so I don't want anybody to be mad at me about that. But he finished while he was in the seminary. He also pastored in Belmont, and so we would on the weekend he would go to Belmont. If the church could afford to feed him and the family, then the family would go up. If they couldn't, we'd stay in Salisbury. We'd walk down the street to Moore's Chapel, and he would go by himself, okay? But then after he graduated, we moved for a brief time to Belmont. And then from Belmont, we moved to Ithaca, New York, in whatever year that was, late 50s. We went to Ithaca, New York, and he pastored there. To be honest with you, I didn't know anything about the environment at the time in terms of segregation or anything. I didn't know. I was just a kid being sent to the principal's office. That was it for me. And when we moved up to Ithaca, though, it was more of a desegregated situation. Our community was basically African Americans, and we had some Caucasians that were in the community. So I got a little bit of seeing people of different color going to school together, all right? Me and the teachers still had a little problems. So they had problems with me. So I still wound up going to the principal's office. And sometimes they just put me and whoever it is I was cutting up with, they just put us in the hallway. All right. So, but then we came back to Salisbury. And if you're familiar with the Methodist church, Methodist preachers move quite a bit, okay? So we came to Salisbury, and he became the pastor of Soldiers Memorial, Amy Zion Church at Liberty and Church Street, where I'm the pastor now. When we came to Salisbury, back to Salisbury, that's when I got introduced to Jim Crow, segregated South, all right? My brother and sister were aware of it, but I wasn't. And I remember when we drove from Ithaca and we were coming into Salisbury, we went down Fulton Street and made that right turn to go down on Liberty Street to go to the church and the parsonage. And I looked up and I said, wow, we've got a YMCA right up the street from us. And there's this little kind of giggling a little bit, because I was the only one in the car that realized that I could not go to that YMCA. And I got introduced to segregation, okay? Right across the street from the parsonage, there was a cafe. I forgot the name of it, but it was a cafe, very popular one. Right now, across the street, you've got the jailhouse and other things there. And they had some of the best food from what I heard, but the Andersons didn't eat there. And the reason my parents would not allow us to eat there is because those who were African American could not eat on the inside. We'd have to walk up to the window of the kitchen and order food if we were going to eat from there. And so my mother and my father said, if we had to eat from a kitchen, we were not eating there. And they told us we weren't to eat there, okay? They had a sense of what was happening in the world. They had a sense of what they wanted us to be and what they were going to be as people, okay? That they recognized that they were people who had worth. They recognized that God created us all. And when he created all of us, he said we were good. And so that's how we were. They understood we had to carry ourselves a certain way. My grandfather, we got that from my grandfather, that even though there was segregation, even though there was discrimination and racism that we had to deal with, that we had to carry ourselves a certain way, first of all, because we were Andersons, all right? And secondly, is that we deserved it, and the Constitution gave rights for its citizens, and we were not claiming to be 3/4 of a citizen. We were not claiming to be less than human, and we're going to carry ourselves in such a way that we represented who we were as a people, and we helped others along the way, okay? And I'm saying all this because when we came back, I was in the 6th grade at Monroe Street School again. That teacher was not there, I don't think. They may not have been. But we were there, and I remember being there. I remember, I was acquainted now with what segregation was all about. I was acquainted with the fact that you had to be careful how you walked, who you looked at, and that it was just a dangerous time to be an African American. Not only that, as I think about it, we had to, it took a while to figure out who we were and what we would be called, okay? We definitely weren't going to be called the N-word, all right? I think at the time we were colored people at that time. And of course, across the street from us, At that time, we had the Trailway bus station. And if you went in there, you had the place for white people, and then you had the place for colored people. You had the colored water fountains, your colored this, colored that. And that's the environment that we lived in. But also it was a dangerous environment also. So you had to be careful where you went, had to be careful how you carried yourself. And one thing about the school system, it was segregated. By law, I think it was legal. Maybe segregation was illegal, but in Salisbury, they said that we lived in a system where it was separate, but it was equal. And it was always separate, but it was never equal, all right? I was at Methodist school, my brother and sister, because I was the youngest, they were at Price High School. And my brother played in the band. And so when we got there, he got his band uniform, and they gave the band uniform to my mother, and she was a seamstress. So she had the band uniforms were the old band uniforms at Boyd High School that they had no use for anymore, so they gave it to Price High School. So the Price High School wore the football uniforms, the band uniforms that used to be at Boyd High School, okay? So my mother was putting patches on patches. It was so old and raggedy. So it was really a lie that it was separate but equal. It was just separate, but it was never equal. The good thing, though, about being at Monroe Street School and my brother and sister at Price High School is that our teachers taught us how to make it in the world. They taught us the regular courses, but also they taught us how to carry ourselves in public, how to act and how not to act. They took care of us. There were students that came there that may not have good, had raggedy clothes. They'd make certain they had good clothes. They took care of our health to make certain we were okay. So they knew how to educate us, not just for the academic portion of it, but how to teach us how to live and make it in the world and carry yourself in such a way that people at least had to respect something about you, okay? So that was the environment. Well, after that year, and that's why I'm here, is that our parents, along with some of the other parents, African-American parents, I started talking about that. Yeah, what were we back then? I think we were still colored, but then we were Negro also, all right? And maybe by the 60s or 70s, we were Black. And that was a big thing because during that time, we were treated like we were second-class citizens. You weren't smart enough. You weren't anything enough. And so our parents made certain that we didn't, that message didn't resonate at home. They had to let us know who we were. And they expected us, my parents, Herman and Ruth Anderson, expected their children to act a certain way. Amen? And if we didn't act that way, we caught it from them. All right? So I'm rambling, y'all. Stay with me. So some of the Black parents said, they kind of put pressure on the school system to desegregate. So my parents asked us, the three of us, if we would go to the white school. And then there was the Kellys. They had 2 or 3 children. I think 2 of them agreed to go. One went 1 year and the other one went the second year. So it was the Herman Junior and Deborah Anderson. It was the Kellys, and then the Farrs. Reverend Farr had a daughter, and she went. So they went to boarding high school. They were the first blacks to go to boarding high school, but I was too young, so I wound up going to Knox Junior High School. And I think they just recently tore Knox down, so it doesn't even exist anymore. But I was the first and only black at that time at Knox Junior High School. And so, you know, it's kind of a miracle that things have progressed, that they progressed. Because I was still kind of that fella that had, you know, teachers had issues with me, all right? And also, you know, when we're up north, we went up north, and they said all these country bumpkins from the South, all right? So they pick on us because we're from the country, from the South. But then when we moved back to Salisbury, then they were upset at us because these old people think from the North, they think they're better than everybody else, you know? So we had to deal with that, and my brother and sister dealt with it better than I did. I still had trouble with people, all right? So the notion that Derrick Anderson was going to be the first and only black person at Knox Junior High School, my parents had to do a whole lot of praying. You know, because I was used to just getting in trouble, all right? And they kind of let me know, now, Derrick, you cannot get in trouble anymore. You know, your people, your black people are dependent on you to do this thing right so that desegregation would happen, all right? So there was a pressure there. But I made it through. I stayed out of trouble 90% of the time. But it was a good experience. Matter of fact, back then, it was kind of funny when you think about it. We had gym class. And when we go to gym class, we change clothes and put our gym. Well, everybody be looking at me because they were told that black folk had tails. So they were looking for my tail.
Oh my God.
And I had to tell them, don't look this way, ain't nothing back there that you want to look at. So we made it through. We made it through okay. And eventually went to it was boarding high school at the time. And things worked out. Things worked out. The best thing that happened to me, I gave my life to the Lord. That's the best thing that happened, because after that, things became easier. You know, I did better in school. Teachers actually wanted to see me come in the classroom, and it worked out. But we spent that time the longer I was there would be more coming. And then when I graduated, that's when they shut down Price High School and Monroe Street School, and we became, you know, desegregated. And I was the last class of boarding high school. They changed it to Salisbury High. The experience was all right. I went to school for 6 years with the ones that I went to Knox with. I knew the boundaries. I knew what to do and what not to do, all right? When the guys, you know, because we're going through adolescence, trying to figure ourselves out, but I knew when they talked about the girls, I had to stop talking. Because there's no way I would talk about girls with them, because they were white girls, okay? You could get hung for looking at a white girl, all right? And it was still, Salisbury still, there are parts of this area that you could go into that area, but you might not come back out, all right? And I remember I had a girlfriend, I wound up marrying her, and we've been married for 51 years. pretty soon we'll hit 52. And so she lived in Spencer across the tracks, not where the white people lived. She lived where the black people lived. And so one night I took a shortcut home after dating. I got lost, and I got lost in a white neighborhood. And I didn't have a whole lot of gas in the car. And so I thought I was gonna run out of gas. But somehow I made it. Because I'm going through these neighborhoods, these dogs barking and all this other kind of stuff. And I'm wondering whether I'm gonna turn up missing in the neighborhood. It's still that kind of atmosphere. But and the other thing about it too is that my brother and sister always did well in school. I was the one that didn't do well in school. And back then, for African Americans, our best schools were schools like Fisk in Nashville, and Hampton in Hampton, Virginia. With my family, most of my family, in terms of relatives, they were school teachers. But if you're Black, being a school teacher, you'd have some that would be doctors and nurses and even attorneys. My sister was a nurse. She went to Hampton, it's Hampton University now, for their nursing school. They were known for their nursing school. My brother, who's 2 years behind her, went to Fisk in Nashville, Tennessee. The college was well known, and then they had a medical school, a Black medical school there, Meharry. And so my brother wanted to be a doctor. My sister wanted to be a nurse. And I wanted to be a truck driver. Okay. But I've said truck driver but I really want to be a football player. Okay, so that's kind of where I was. That kind of lets you know academically where I was. But when I graduated, I could have gotten scholarships to different places, but I decided I didn't want to go to an all-white or predominantly white college, because I could deal with going to school with people, but then I could get to go home and be with my family. So I didn't want to have to be 24/7 dealing with segregation and all of that. I didn't want to be the only Black person on the football. I didn't want any of that. And what made me decide that is that the last football game I played, we were doing real well that year. We were winning all of our games, and I got hurt, and I missed some games. But then I came back the last game of the season, which was my last football game for Boydton High School, scored a couple of touchdowns, and realized this is the last time I'd be playing. And I saw everybody in my class just having a good time, jumping up and down, celebrating. But I'm standing there by myself. And the thought came to me, I've been with these people for 6 years, and they can't even pat me on the back and celebrate, because that's the atmosphere. So I said, I'm not doing that again. So I wound up going to Hampton University, and that's where I graduated. So I thought my life of desegregating places was over with. And my wife and I and our child, we wound up in Louisville, Kentucky, because that's where my father was pastoring. That's where my grandfather pastored. He pastored there. And so I was out of college, and we began living there. Lo and behold, there was one of our members was, worked in the parking lot of Louisville Home Federal parking cars. And he always told them, you guys need to get a black person to work for you. And they would always say, well, if you find a good black person, we'll hire that person, all right? That's what they always said. So I was looking for a better job. When I got out, I started working for the state. I was making $475 a month. And they were always late. The checks coming from Frankfort, Kentucky were always late. So I said, I gotta get a better job. And so I went to Louisville Home Federal and got a job in their management training program. And they were training me to be a manager. And so Louisville, I'm the, once again, first and the only black. But you know, I just celebrate my parents. I celebrate people like you who understood what life should be. That had respect for one another. And there are a lot of people, black, white, that helped me along the way. My sixth grade teacher said, Derrick, I noticed you've been making C's in class. He said, but you're not gonna make another, he said, if you ever make another C in my class, and this is when they had corporal punishment. Anybody know about that?
Oh, yeah.
He either had a belt, a thick belt, and you'd have to pull your pants down and he would put you over his lap and, you know, give it to you. Or he had a pack with holes in it.
Oh, yeah.
They hit your hand or hit your behind, all right? And he says, anytime you make anything less than A or B, you get this paddle. Well, guess what? A miracle happened. You know, a miracle happened. I began making A's and B's because Mr. Johnson said, you got more in you than you're willing to use. And I'm not going to let you do anything less than that, okay? And so when I got the opportunity, you know, in Louisville, Kentucky, I wound up being hired. I started at the bottom, but I was there in their training program. And I became their first branch manager at J-Town and outside of Louisville, Kentucky. And my parents and people along the way helped me to know how to carry myself. They talked about responsibility. And so our effort was not about just going to having desegregation. It was more about human beings and how we need to treat each other. You know, we can look different, we can think different, but we're created by the same God, okay? And God gives us unique abilities. You know, some of us can look as crazy as we can look. We got noses that look a certain way, ears, and all of this. We look different. And some people may laugh at us, but God didn't laugh at us when he created us. And my parents helped me and my brother and sister to have, to not only carry ourselves in a way that was presentable, but to make a contribution in the world. And that was a blessing for us, and it still is. Because of that, like I say, my sister was a nurse. My brother was a doctor. My sister retired a couple of years ago. I need to call my brother. He said he was going to retire. He's a nephrologist. He said he's going to retire in December, but I got to check on him, see if he did. He may not have retired. My wife keeps asking me when I'm going to retire. And so I said, I either have to wait for the Lord to tell me that or for the Lord to retire me himself, all right? But it's a blessing. And because of that, I think the world is better when we acknowledge each other, we treat each other the way we should. We just have troubles getting along with each other. It's not just black and white, it's black and black, white and white, whatever color. But the Lord's coming back one of these old days. And he's looking to see how we treat each other and whether we care for each other. There has been progress made, and I think as people keep working to turn the hands of the clock back, so it won't work. But it's working, and people are getting to know each other. As a black person, like I say, you're either gonna be a teacher, a professional black person, teacher, doctor, etc. These days, my wife and I have 4 children. And if you were to ask me, what do my children do? I can't answer that question. I know our daughter, she's the only one that has children. So she has all of our grandchildren. Got 2 girls and 2 boys. And she's a stay-at-home mom. And we're glad about that, because she invests a lot of time into our grandchildren. Our son, I know he works for Bank of America. I know he travels around the world, but I don't know what he does. He explains it to me about all this technology. They'll have a teaching session where he sets up all of the equipment for that, so it's streamed all around the world. And he tells me about it, and I just look at him, because I don't know what in the world he's talking about. I don't know about this stuff. I'm grateful that we have grandchildren, because our youngest grand can show me how to use the cell phone. I really appreciate that. I can't use. So I don't know what he does, but he travels around the world. Our daughter, we know what she does. She takes care of our grandchildren. And we have a son. He's at the University of Seattle, and he does something there, and he gets paid for it. All right, I used to know what he used to do, because he did graduate from Livingstone College, and he was a recruiter, and he would travel around recruiting, and that's how he wound up in Seattle, because he liked it. And then our youngest, our daughter, she does something too. I don't know what it is. I mean, every time you explain it to me, but she works with companies and help them to set up stuff and all of that. And I have it in my phone. I wrote it down in my phone. So if you really wanted to wait and find out, I could go on my phone. Because the last time they came together, I said, tell me what you do again. Give me your title. And so they gave it to me. So I know the titles, but I don't know what they do. And I celebrate that because the world is changing. And all of our children are in a different world than we were. And technology and innovation is so different. But the beauty of it is that our children can go and apply for a job and work in places and use their gifts and abilities. And they're not as restricted to where they can go and what they can do. And we celebrate that. And so I think I'm gonna probably stop here. There's more that I could say, but I think David Post, when he was at a gathering where I shared, and basically I shared the way I did today, because many of the people who were there knew who I was when I was here. And again, I just shared. And the thing about it too is that, as I keep saying it, that we teach our children and we teach others to make certain you make a difference in the world. That I'm not just here for my generation or my children's generations, but I'm here for my children's children and their children. And we've got to make certain that we make a difference in the world. We leave something for someone that they can benefit from our existence here on earth. And I am so grateful that I had parents and grandparents and other relatives that took the time to make certain that I stayed out of enough trouble that I could finish school and that I could make a difference. And I'm so proud of our grandchildren. I'm so proud to coming back to Salisbury. I never wanted to come back to Salisbury. Really, I never did. My brother and sister never came back. The only time they came back is when my sister came to get married and my brother came to help us celebrate our 50th wedding anniversary. So I just wanted to share that with you, if that's of any help or meaning to you. And I want to thank you too for what you do. All of us have to make a difference in this world. And we may not, we may not be celebrated. Nobody may have any great celebration when our time has come to an end. The president may not show up. The governor may not ask somebody to give them a letter, put my name on it. That may not happen, but we can know that whenever we seek to do things that are helpful and we seek to do the best that we can do, that we're making a difference in this world. So I'm gonna stop here. There may be some questions. I don't know if that clock is accurate or not. Is that accurate?
Yeah, it's 10:40.
So I'm gonna stop here. I'm gonna stop here because they said we had about an hour. We're gonna open up for questions. And I think it would be good to do that right now. So I don't want to stretch anything.
My question is, friends. Did you make friends while you went to Knox and Boyden High School? Yeah, that's
a good question. Thanks. Yeah, I did make friends. Again, I had to learn how to behave, and we got along. Again, there's this barrier between male and female, but I have friends. I did go to my 50th high school anniversary. David Post went to school with my brother, and so yes, we did make friends. I did make friends. It wasn't isolated, and so that's a blessing.
My brother, since I retired here and, I sang with the Jubilee Choir with your thing, one of the things that really bothered me, especially coming from Ohio and everything else, during this last election that we had, some of the members of the choir expressed to me their fear of going out to vote like at night. And they had to do during the daytime. And my dear friend Jerome, who sits next to me and beats the drum, he was trying to explain things to me. And of course, coming from a different perspective, it hit me, that maybe you can explain, with the situation we have, why there's still fear about doing that. They had to vote during the day because they didn't want to go out at night. Is that fear that, because of the ages? I was just concerned.
I personally, I think the atmosphere has changed recently. It seems to be more division, and seems to be more of a disrespect even for our own government. And that people feel that they have to take matters into their own hands. Again, one of the things I had to experience, I didn't experience a lot of what some people experience. There's a whole lot of Black history that doesn't get told.
Mhm.
A lot of people were lynched. A lot of people killed. I had a friend of mine who was a few years younger than I was. He used to always like to come to the parsonage on Liberty Street. And one night he just said, it's getting dark, I'm kind of afraid. And so, we told him, go on, get home, go home. But that's the last time I saw him. He had a white friend, the schools were desegregated then. I was close to graduating from high school. And he had a little friend of his. And they got into a verbal argument. And so his friend, after he got off the bus, both of them got off the bus, his friend evidently told his father. And his father got a gun, ran out of the house with the gun. He saw him and he started running. And his father shot my friend in the back. And while he was laying on the ground pleading for his life, he shot him in the head and killed him. That was a tense time in Salisbury because, the so-called justice system did not want to find him guilty for killing a Black boy. And so the leaders of the community were trying to figure out how they're going to try to keep from having a riot in Salisbury, because they were going to have a riot. And I was going to be in the front of that line, because they killed my friend, a man shooting a gun. And so I think they eventually found him guilty by insanity or something like that, insanity.
What year was that?
That was it had to be somewhere in the late 60s. Quentin Tracy. Ed Tracy used to have he had a taxi service. It was his youngest son that was shot. And so things like that have happened, but you're having more people now who seem to be more violent. And we have an atmosphere where, January 6th, that happens, that's real. People kill. Personally, I'm crazy enough to do whatever I'm gonna do anyway. But there are people who are afraid. I guess my experience, I had to get used to dealing with certain things. I only had one incident at Knox Junior High School. So, sometimes I walk, because I walk to school. I walk from Knox was Mahaley down there. So I walk from Church and Liberty Street to Knox Junior High. I go straight down. I didn't cut through anything. I did the long way. And sometimes, people throw stuff at me and that kind of stuff, but it was never much like that. But one little guy, and I wonder where they got him from. But he came to Knox from reform school. And we got in it a little bit. And I was just as much at fault with him. We were sitting in chairs, it was assembly, and I jumped in a chair before he did, and he got mad, and he pushed me, and I pushed him back. And but that's the extent of that. I mean, people were very tense over that situation because they, afraid that something would happen at Knox. But it didn't happen at Knox because, my parents taught me how to act.
Yeah.
So people, there's some challenges now. But the biggest challenge is the challenge of our democracy. We really haven't everybody hasn't gotten to the point where they can have their opinion about something without having to accuse someone of something. We can vote for different parties and people, but we don't have to be angry about it. And I don't have to vilify you for how you vote. You don't have to vilify me for how we vote. I mean, that's the richness of our democracy. And I think it's really being challenged right now. But if we look at history, it's been challenged before. It's just that I'm experiencing that because I remember meeting at Soldiers Memorial, Amy Zion Church with other African Americans in the community talking about how we're going to fight for our rights in a non-violent way. And that's what we did. It was non-violent. We were committed to non-violence. And, you know, but it's a rich experience and it's made me a better person. And we just have to make certain that we don't lose our democracy. And we don't get to the point where we disrespect our Constitution. So that's kind of where I feel. I saw a hand here too. Okay.
Thank you for being here this morning. I just wanted to say that, you know, in our communities today, you were talking about the event that happened there. That was 60 years ago. And we don't think that that kind of stuff is prevalent today. We were in my wife and I were in a meeting at our church last week, a couple of weeks ago, and we're doing a series on like Christian nationalism. And one of the people in our group spoke up and he said, or she said, that, you know, our son is dating a young Asian girl, and it's his fiance, and they live in a very well-to-do neighborhood here in Concord. And she says she was out walking one day, and someone drove by, lowered their window, and just started yelling profanities at her. You know, that thing, you wouldn't think that things like that are prevalent today, but they are. People still have fears. A lot of it's fear of the unknown, not knowing. I think relationships really help get us on a level where we are observant of each other and see you as God's child, just as like I am a God's child. And Einstein said that evil will not. It's not the evil that's going to do us in. It's the people that see the evil and do nothing and are quiet. So it's up to us as a whole to, anytime that we see something that is not right, is to when we can, is to speak up about it and say, no, that's not right.
Let me just say this too. You know, to justify slavery, there's some things that had to happen. On my paternal side, we can trace our history back to Africa, and even an African king from one of the villages. But a lot of African Americans, they don't know where they came from other than Rowan County Hospital or something like that. So they have no foundation of who they are. I remember coming up looking at Tarzan and the savages around Tarzan and all of that. And so for many African Americans, that kind of shame and lack of self-worth is still a part of them. And we spent a lot of time trying to make strides in doing better and assimilating into the society and et cetera. Unfortunately, we have not always spent enough time in helping us to overcome our own trauma that we have. And so we're still working on that too. And that's our responsibility. But I appreciate what you said, because that's the essence of what we have to deal with. It's just how we handle one another and care for one another. All right, yes.
I just wanted to say thank you, because I have
as an 80-year-old, who spent her life in the South, grew up near Atlanta. I'm thankful too for parents who taught me we're all God's children and to be treated equally. But also, we've seen a lot of progress, but we've got a long way to go. And your discussion today with us and your honesty and your sharing is the way it all goes forward and makes more progress. Thank you.
Thank you.